Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on the Dairy Signal. We're going to be diving into a little bit of something different here on the Dairy Signal, and that is Nexus presentation and innovation. So, if you were at our annual business conference back in March, you might have had a chance to stop by and meet or hear the presentations about the Nexus presenters that were on the stage throughout the conference. But if you didn't have a chance to maybe sit through the whole presentation or get those one-on-one discussions in like you wanted, today is your chance, as we have one of the presenters here with us this afternoon, and that is Pathway Intermediates with their product Lipidol Protect. But before we dive into that discussion, let's take a moment to talk about today in history, because it wouldn't be a Dairy Signal if we didn't reflect back on what's happened today around the world. And right now, we are headed to 2004. It was on this day that the World War II Memorial opened in Washington, D.C., and it recognized the 16 million men and women who served during the war. And a fun fact, that it is approximately 4.6 million visitors annually to the World War II Memorial. So that is your interesting fact for this afternoon, but let's get into the whole discussion about what Lipidol Protect is and how Pathway Intermediates came about with this product. And joining us this afternoon, we have Dr. Chancel Park, who's a product manager with Pathway Intermediates USA, as well as Brad Bunnett, who is the National Ruminant Account Manager with Pathway Intermediates USA. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today. We're excited to dive in and talk more about this really great product. But before we do so, I'm going to have both of you give a little bit of an introduction about yourself. So, Chancel, if you wouldn't mind kicking things off with a little bit about who you are and your role with Pathway Intermediates.
Sure, of course. So nice to meet you all today. My name is Chancel Park. And yep, as you can guess by my name, I'm actually from South Korea. And then I came to United States in 2015 for my PhD. And I got my PhD from Purdue University. And actually, my major is monogastric nutrition. So my major was nutrition in swine and poultry. And after then, I served another 2 years as a postdoc in same Purdue University. And then I joined the Pathway Intermediate as a product manager. So my job in Pathway Intermediate is involved in the research and development, as well as the technical support of all of our products. So nice to meet you all today.
Well, thank you for being here, Chancel. And now, before I jump over to Brad, who's going to give us an introduction about himself, as well as a little bit of an intro into who Pathway or what Pathway Intermediates is, excuse me, I do want to set the stage for Nexus, as well as why Pathway Intermediates is here, because this is a little bit of a different format. If you're watching the Dairy Signal, you're usually getting a lot of information about new research, maybe some things, tips and tricks you can use at home. But this one, we're talking something very specific, and that's a new and innovative product. And the reason we have Nexus at the business conference is that it's a way to see what's coming down the pike, some of this really interesting technology, products, services, things that can really help you on your farm, or maybe it's something that you're thinking about or trying to find more information on. And that is with these 5 companies that we have at Nexus. And those companies were selected from a really great group of applications from dairy farmers like yourself that were able to kind of go through those applications, listen to some of those application videos and see, what do other dairy producers want to learn more about? What is the most innovative out of the applications we've received this year? And Lipidol Protect with Pathway Intermediates is one of those. So with all of that being said, with setting the stage on that front, I'm going to turn it over to Brad Bunnett. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself as well as the company?
Sure. Hey, Amber, thanks for having us today. Yeah, my name is Brad Bunnett. I grew up in Texas Panhandle, Amarillo. Family was in the feed business around the feedlot cattle side of the industry. In 2002, we launched a company to produce fatty acids, long calcium salts, long chain fatty acid bypass fat for the dairy industry. And I've been involved in dairy supplements and additives in the dairy industry ever since that time. So a couple of years ago, even pre-launch of the product Lipidol Protect that we're going to talk to you about today, I got to know the team at Pathway Intermediates. They shared this technology with me. And as we progressed in the industry and our dairymen are now paid significantly on butterfat and components, products like this Lipidol Protect really can be a game changer for the dairyman as we help to improve butter fat in the milk as well as feed efficiency improvements. So really got excited about the technology, and before you knew it, I came on board a little over a year ago, and I've been out in the market talking to nutritionists and dairymen about this new technology.
Well, Brad, we're excited to have you on here today, and thanks for joining us and setting the stage about, how this kind of came about. But let's get into the nitty-gritty and talk a little bit more specifically about Lipidol Protect, how it works, and kind of some of the areas behind, why producers might be seeing, first rumen bypass absorption accelerator. What does that mean? So I'm going to hand it over to you guys to get us started on that, and we'll be asking questions throughout. So if you're a producer watching or a listener of any sort, make sure to ask your questions via Slido, and we'll get to them here throughout today's discussion. So, but with that, what does it mean? What is, the first rumen bypass absorption accelerator, and how does that work? Because when you put it in those words, it kind of gets this big concept, and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels like a lot of information in a very small type line. So, Chancellor, would you mind giving us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So Lipidol Protect, as you can see here, is the first rumen bypass absorption accelerator. And the reason why we said absorption accelerator is the Lipidol works on the cell membrane level to enhance the absorption of nutrients into the cell membrane. So I will go through the mode of action of how Lipidol works on dairy cows. But before I move on to mode of action, I'd like to go through a little bit of the background information, how we come up with this whole absorption accelerator technology. So before we developed Lipidol and Lipidol Protect, we were thinking about how we can improve the digestibility and then improve the feed efficiency of the animals. So traditionally, there were technologies involving the feed enzyme product, which can directly increase the digestibility by hydrolyzing those large molecule nutrients into the smaller molecule nutrients. Or there was also the gut health products, such as yeast products or the probiotics products, which can improve the gut health and indirectly increase the digestibility of nutrients. And also there were the feed manufacturing and the processing technologies, such as fine grinding or pelleting or cooking technology, to enhance the digestibility of nutrients in certain feed ingredients or the whole feed. So with all this current technology, pathway intermediates started thinking how we can further improve the digestibility of nutrients together with this whole current technology. So as a first step, we think back the definition of the term digestion. So the term digestion or digestibility actually consists of the four major processes: ingestion, degradation, absorption, and excretion. And then the major process among these four processes are degradation and the absorption, which are mainly happening in the small intestine. So degradation is the simple breaking down of the large molecule nutrients into the smaller molecule nutrients by the enzymatic hydrolysis. On the other hand, absorption is more of a biological process whereby these receptors in the cell membrane recognize their target nutrients and then uptake those nutrients into the cells. So those two pieces are going together to improve the digestibility of nutrients. And then the previous technology really focused on this degradation part, but none of the technology focused on this absorption part. So with that, this Lipidol technology has been developed and then actually widely used in the monogastric feed for over 15 years. So Lipidol is the core technology of pathway intermediate, and it has been successful in monogastric feed industry. So, and then we're going back to the dairy cows. So we developed this rumen protected Lipidol, which is includes the proprietary technology with the carbohydrate coating. So deliver this Lipidol into the small intestine and then expect the same mode of action we have been observed in the monogastric animals, which is the improvement in digestibility of nutrients by enhancing the absorption of nutrients. So let's dive into what is Lipidol. So Lipidol is mainly consists of this molecule, lysophospholipid. So lysophospholipid is actually derived from phospholipid, and then phospholipid has a one phosphate head and two fatty acid tail. And pathway name ADH has the unique enzyme technology with the phospholipase A2, which can cut off the one fatty acid tail from phospholipid. So lysophospholipid basically has one phosphate head and one fatty acid tail. Well, let's see how it works in the cell membrane level. So actually, the cell membrane consists of the phospholipid, which has one phosphate head and two fatty acid tail. But since lipidol contains lysophospholipid, which only has a one fatty acid tail, once animal ingests these LPL molecules, it immediately goes inside of the cell membrane level. And then because of the absence of this one fatty acid tail, it will increase the fluidity of the cell membrane, so makes it more fluidal structure. Therefore, more nutrients can be flowed into the cells. And also, not only that, the surface area of cell membrane will be also expanded because of this increased fluidity. So more nutrients can have access to the cell by increased surface area. And also, LPL is actually known as an emulsifier in the market, but we do believe LPL is doing more than emulsifier. However, this emulsification function is also one of the key factor of that enhanced digestibility, especially in the fatty acid. So you can see here the water and the oil, they never be mixed each other. However, lipidol is added. This LPL molecule works as an emulsifier. So this oil can be dissolved into the water by forming this micromicelle. And those micromicelle will enhance the digestibility of fatty acid in the small intestine.
So, Chancel, I think that is a really good setup on what the product is and how it exactly works in terms of, being able to increase the absorption of these nutrients. But let's talk about it on a level that, well, actually, hold on. Before we get to that, I don't want to skip that we had a question come in via Slido. And I want to ask that one because I think it's an important question to ask up front here. And it reads, you use rumen bypass. Is this the same as rumen protected and just a different way of saying it?
Well, that's a very good question. So that carbohydrate coating technology we have is really a rumen protected technology, which is protected through the rumen fermentation. And then it releases the LPL molecule in the small intestine after passing through the abomasum.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, but now let's talk about how this exactly works on a dairy farm. Let's go to that producer mindset and think about, well, this sounds great, but how do we know it works? Can we talk about some of the research that's been done on this product to really dive into what this could look like if we were to put this on our farm?
Sure. So far we run the one research trial in the commercial research farm in Wisconsin, and also we run several the field trials with the customer who help us to just to run the trial as an off-on or the comparison of the data with the previous like a 2 to 3 years data set. And then result has been pretty successful. And then this is the summary table I want to share. So you can see here that this is the 5 trials that we have done not only in the research farm, but also in the commercial dairy farm. So on average, we have seen 5 pounds increase in energy corrected milk. And also, since lipid protect can enhance the digestibility of the fatty acid in small intestine, it works pretty well with the bypass fat, such as calcium salt fatty acid or the palm fat in the ration. So it also increased the butter fat as a result by average 0.1% point. And also it increased the preformed fatty acid in the milk by 0.1% point. And also overall, because of the increased feed efficiency, and then dry matter intake is sometimes reduced but most times it's not really affecting the dry matter intake. And because of that, we had the improved feed efficiency by the 0.1%.
Okay, so, we've got some great trials that you're showing us here. Let's talk about it in terms of return on investment, because as a dairy farmer, that's always something that's important. And we always like to think about the dollars and cents. So when using a product like Lipidol Protect, how are we putting it within our feed, or how is it being provided to our cattle first off? And then let's talk about in terms of, you're getting this increased butter fat, you're getting increased feed efficiency. How does that assist and aid in the product cost and return on investment for this product?
Sure. Hey, I can grab that one, Amber. Again, Brad Bunnett here. So, first of all, just in terms of incorporating this product into the feed, it's fed at 10 grams per head per day. Okay, so fairly small inclusion rate. Kind of think of it in the realm of feeding yeast or what have you. And we typically, depending on the farm, a lot of times this will go into a BTM or the premix at the feed mill. Okay. If the customer happens to have the micro bends and that technology, it flows great through those systems, and we introduce it into the feed that way. But we're recommending we feed 10 grams per head per day. Okay, and so what that looks like is it's about a 15-cent per head per day investment in the product. We were actually on the phone with a dairyman in the Southwest. This very question about return on investment came up. He said, "What can we expect?" And I said, "Well, our trial results and our research shows sort of an average of 5 pounds of energy corrected milk. To me, that's a big number to try and represent." I said, "Let's just talk about it in these terms as we move into summer heat. What if we were able to get you 2 pounds of energy corrected milk, and let's just call that 20 cents a pound in milk, 2 pounds, there's 40 cents there." And then what we're also going to see with this product is we're likely going to see a reduction in feed in dry matter intake. Okay, so if we saw, let's say, a 1 pound, pound and a half decrease in dry matter intake at 15 cents a pound, you figure there's 15, 20 cents right there in feed that wasn't fed. And then on the positive side, if we get you, another 40 cents in milk, all of a sudden you have about 60 cents there on a 15-cent investment. So you're really talking about a 4-to-1 return. And we'd like to see it in that range of a 3 to 4 times return on that 15-cent investment.
Well, I appreciate you being honest with the cost and, thinking about it in those ways, especially as we come into, like you mentioned, the summer months where milk production sometimes takes a dip during some of those heat stressors there. So let's talk about it for when cows are stressed. Does it, still hold up, or has that not been looked at? I know we've got some great trials and research that you guys have gone through, but when it's, cows that are stressed going through some of these areas, does it still hold up? I know you mentioned it might be a little bit different, but what can producers expect, if you will?
Yeah, the expectation that we set again on a Southwest U.S. farm where heat is already beginning to be an issue, I certainly wouldn't set an expectation that they're going to see an increase as we move into summer heat of 5 pounds in energy corrected milk. But what I would expect is, as we usually see dry matter intake drop off with the summer heat, that's going to follow through. But likely, you're not going to see as big a hit on the energy corrected milk. So you're going to see an improvement in feed efficiency. You're probably still going to see a little bit of drop in energy corrected milk, but you're going to see that drop in dry matter intake. And overall, you're still going to see a nice return on investment, if that makes sense. Summer's always a little bit tricky to try these products out in, because we do have that summer heat stress to deal with. But that's kind of what we expect in the summer. As we move into the cooler months in the year, and a lot of times the way we're trying to look at this product on farm, it's so great now that we have so much data on the farms. We will typically run the product for, say, 60 to 90 days on farm, and then we'll ask the dairyman to provide us the data from the prior year, and even sometimes 2 prior years of that same exact period. And that's what will measure the benefits of the product against. So, we know the genetics are always getting better year over year. The herds are always showing improvement. But what we've seen with Lipidol Protect is farms where we've looked at over 2 or 3 year period where we fed it in the last period, we're seeing an exponential jump in butterfat and feed efficiency that for the nutritionists and the dairyman was not accountable to the normal, changes in genetics and improvements on dairy, if that makes sense.
That does. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And it helps to show, within their own farm, within their own entity, what the product's doing. Because yes, as much as we are always improving, sometimes it just doesn't happen like a flip of a switch. And you can really kind of tell with some of these products when you look back on data. But let's talk about feeding. You mentioned that it was 10 grams per head per day. So is this a product that, you can feed and it's going to have improvements right away? Does there need to be a lead-in time for this product for those milking cows? As well as if you're going to stop using this product tomorrow after using it for X amount of time, will it have any carryover? So let's talk about that phase within that cow's lactation and when people should be feeding it.
So
Chan, I'll let you handle that one. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. So usually, based on the trial data we have, actually we see the response a week after feeding Lipido Protect. However, when we bring out to the customers and then running in a field trial with customers, so the customers usually say it took about a month to see the actual response in terms of the milk yield and the butterfat response. So yeah, I would say usually takes a month to see the significant improvements in the milk production. And also in the same trial, we also tracked down a month after we stopped feeding Lipido Protect. And we did not see any the carryover effect. So that being said, there were no significant difference between the control group and Lipido Protect group after we stopped feeding the product. So that means that if we stop feeding Lipido Protect, that effect immediately fade away. And then so the milk production will probably go back to where it was before.
Okay. And then talking about, the different types of cows that we have in our herd. We've got a lot of different lactations. We've got, our springing heifers who maybe have just come into the herd, as well as, those older cows that typically have higher production. How will it impact, those various parities within the herd, if at all?
I see. So, well, obviously we need more research to really dive into the details of the production lactation cycle, but we see very significant improvements in the transition cows. So for the first month of lactation, we believe Lipido Protect really help dairy cows to derive all the possible energy they need to maximize their milk production. And then later on, at the end of the lactation phase, we also see an improvement in feed efficiency, actually. So their milk production was not really improved significantly, but their dry matter intake was a little down, but they produced the same amount of the milk. So we assume that at the end of the lactation period, Lipido Protect helped dairy cows to derive the feed efficiency to maintain their milk production. But in general, that effect of improvement in the energy corrected milk and the butterfat is typically shown in the overall phase of lactation.
Okay. I'm going to take us a step back, and I guess I should have probably asked this when we were talking about the research. So my apologies because it's a little bit of a throw in here. But, one thing that I want you guys to talk about for a second here is that when you talked about these research trials that you guys did, if we went back to that slide, I think it was like 5 or 6, and you had some in Wisconsin and you also had some in the Southwest. And if people looked at those dates, it was 2023, 2024. How old is this product? Let's talk about that for a second in terms of the age of the product and why 23 and 24 has been when research is done, as well as maybe what's next, if anything, for the research side of things, because I want people to recognize and understand that this whole point of Nexus is new and innovative. But let's also talk about where the product's at then in that phase of new and innovative.
I see.
Yeah, well,
yeah, Fred, you can take.
Sure. Amber, so just to kind of, step back just for a moment, I think Chancel mentioned, we've been feeding this product in the monogastric world for many, many years under the name Lipidol Ultra. In 2019, that was really the first effort to take this product into the dairy industry at the Ohio State University, where we ran a trial on the unprotected version of Lipidol, which is the same that we feed the monogastrics. The results of that research at Ohio State were very good. Okay. And so the company got really excited about the technology in dairy. They did some follow-up studies and they didn't see, unfortunately, the same results in that unprotected version. So, they went back to the drawing board and they said, okay, what's the impact here in the rumen? And they discerned that, hey, this product might be better, fed to ruminants in a protected or bypass version. And so that's when they began to develop the bypass version, the carbohydrate protected version, which we call the Lipidol Protect. And then we started doing that work, Chancel, at the Wisconsin Research Farm. That was 2020, what?
January.
2023. So it took some time to develop that protected version. We ran it in that Wisconsin farm, and Chancel's actually got the slides here. And we actually ran a control with no Lipidol. We ran the unprotected version of Lipidol, and then we ran the protected version, and we looked at all of those scenarios. And we still saw a response with the unprotected product, but we saw a much better response that was statistically significant on the Lipidol Protect product. So that was all in that 2023 timeframe. I came on board with the company in 2024. Based on kind of my review of everything, I think we're ready to go ahead and put this onto some farms. And through my network of relationships with nutritionists and farms, we began to get the product on farm and begin to look at some of these field trials. So that's sort of been the evolution. I'd say today, as we sit here today, we have somewhere in the range of approximately 50,000 cows on this product today in farms across Illinois, Wisconsin, down into Texas, Colorado, et cetera, Idaho, et cetera.
Well, thank you for that background, because I wanted people to recognize that because this is, yes, new in the dairy space doesn't mean that it's necessarily something that was just brought forth all, willy-nilly and hasn't had the time and the research behind it, because that's not the case at all. And it's obviously been very successful for the farms who have decided to implement it. But, one of the areas that I want to talk about for a second, and pardon me for this, because I know it's a buzzword in the dairy and agriculture space, and it's sustainability. It's one of those words that everybody's been talking about. So how does something like Lipidol Protect, potentially work its way in or fit within that sustainability, especially when we're talking about maybe methane reduction or carbon credits and all of these type of things? So does this fit into the conversation?
Yeah, of course, that's a great question. So basically, this technology can improve the digestibility of nutrients. So that being said, the less nutrients will be excreted into the manure. So we can have some carbon credit there that reduce the burden to the environment, so that we can contribute to the sustainability of the entire dairy production. Actually, we are currently working on that carbon credit with another partner company. So yeah, we also, Lipidol Protect Technology is also looking forward to having that carbon credit, the benefit as well.
Well, I appreciate you talking about that, because yes, it's definitely something that's on people's mind, and it's a great piece to add to the product. So excited to hear that, and that it might be coming down the way here sooner rather than later. We had a question come in, so I'm going to throw that one to Slido, and it reads, how is this Lipidol Protect different from other rumen protected products? So would you mind just, talking about its differences and why you guys, I mean, obviously you have a little bit of bias on you, but why this product might be superior or different than other products?
So, yeah, it is a great question. And I think probably what we want to do is think about this in terms as a completely separate technology. Then, we know today we're feeding, protected amino acid products or protected fat products, et cetera. So this Lipidol Protect does not in any way would replace those tools that the dairyman has at hand. What it would do is anytime we have nutrients that are being absorbed in the small intestine, we're going to make that happen more efficiently, more effectively. Okay. So if we think about a really high quality diet that may include some of these bypass technologies, the amino acids, fatty acids, et cetera, we're gonna basically, a term I'd use in simple English is we're gonna help turbocharge the absorption of those fatty acids and those amino acids into the animal at the cellular level. So we're not going to replace those technologies. We're actually going to work alongside them and enhance absorption of all nutrients, particularly there in the small intestine.
Well, I think that's a great way to phrase it, is that turbocharge. I think that's something everybody can get their head wrapped around. And it sounds like it's a really great way to, like you mentioned, pair with something else that you might already be doing or feeding on your farm, like amino acids or fatty acids. But let's talk about it. I don't want to go negative, but we're going to go negative for a second. Let's talk about it in terms of how or does it turbocharge, some pathogens or mycotoxins? Does it have any negative impacts when dealing with some of those side of things?
Well, actually, that's the question I had the most whenever I had a meeting and then presentation with the nutritionist. So the answer is no, of course, because that most of those pathogens, actually, when they are invaded into animal's body, they go through this tight junction protein, and then that syndrome is typically known as a leaky gut syndrome. So there's a breach in tight junction protein, and pathogens invaded into the body. Well, the lipido technology is actually working on the cell membrane. So tight junction is the link between two cells, but lipido is working on the single cell and the surface of those cells. And also, there's a one broiler chicken study showing that feeding lipido actually increased the gene expression of the tight junction protein. And we believe that's because this individual epithelial cell had an increased nutrients inside of the cell. So therefore, it had a more nutrients to produce more tight junction within a cell. Therefore, it had an increased gut integrity. So actually, feeding lipido protect will help them to build up the intestinal immunity.
I think that's something that, sounds really positive. And I am excited to hear that, it's got the good side of things, but not necessarily some of the negatives that could happen with absorption. But, sticking on that train of, again, I don't want to harp on the negatives, but let's talk about some of those give and takes, because there's no silver bullet. That is the one thing we all know in the dairy world is, unfortunately, there is no silver bullet that's going to give us everything we want every single time. So are there any limitations or maybe challenges or things that producers should be thinking about if they're thinking about adding this product to their ration?
I would say over our experience over this last year putting it onto farm, we are seeing benefits in those farms. We put it onto open lot dairy in the Western U.S. And that herd was in the 85 pounds of milk range, and we saw a nice response of 5 pounds there. But also those dairies that are really the high producers, where they're really pushing those cows. My gut tells me, and we've got a lot more research to do on this technology. My gut tells me that on those real high producing cows where we're pushing them with a really strong diet, that's really where this product shines even further. So, this product is not going to fix issues on farm, nutrition or otherwise, but where you really have a strong diet, you've really got high producing cows, we really feel like this has the ability to give you kind of that last leg up, that last bit of incremental production that you're searching for, and can kind of be the last, in a way, the last piece of the puzzle.
Okay. And when we talk about components, we talked about how it can have, an increase in butter fat, as well as, increased feed efficiency. But the one we haven't talked about is protein. How does it impact protein, if at all?
So this lipido, as I show you in the slides, the LPL molecule is working on the cell membrane level and then increase the digestibility of overall nutrients. And there were also several studies in the monogastric animals showing that feeding lipido increased the digestibility, total tract digestibility of crude protein as well. So this increased absorption through the cell membrane will also working on the amino acid level as well. So it will enhance the absorption of the amino acid in the small intestine. So overall, it will increase the digestibility of crude protein, the whole protein in the ration as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. When we're thinking about, adding in new products, especially as a dairy farmer, we don't just add in all, on a whim, if you will. We like to know, more information and getting that information from a trusted source. So if you're talking to dairy producers here, where would you recommend that if they're interested in learning more, maybe kind of diving into this, learning on their own, seeing if this is a right fit for their farm, where would you encourage them to go to get that more information, or, have a chance to talk to somebody about what this could look like for them?
A great question, Amber. We can certainly, we do have some clients that are happy to talk with other dairy producers. We have some nutritionists as well that are happy to speak with nutritionists or dairymen about their experience with the technology. So we always make those folks available. But really, the way we think it makes sense to engage is, first of all, it is new technology. So my job every day, and Chancel's job, is to actually educate the market, educate the dairymen, educate the nutritionists in the field, and help them understand this technology and what it's about, what's the mode of action, what's the basic research behind it. So we really want to be educational in terms of sharing that. It may or may not be a fit for the farm right now, but we think it's an important technology to understand. So the way we like to engage is, hey, if you're interested in this technology, talk with your nutritionist, let them know there's a new technology you're interested in. We are happy to set up a 45-minute Zoom call and take the dairymen and their nutritionists through the technology, answer questions. We're happy to come on site and do those same things. But we really think the first step is just educating. And then really it's up to the dairymen and their nutritionists to understand, is this a product that fits into what we're trying to do right now?
And I have to say, I appreciate that last phrase that you had there, Brad. Is this the product that can fit in our on the farm right now? Because that is the question. Sometimes it might not be a now project. It might be something that happens down the line. But having that ability to talk to somebody and ask those questions is ultimately extremely important. And, as we're thinking about Lipidol Protect in the dairy space and how it is still newer. So what's next in terms of either research or, just anything with Lipidol Protect that is coming down the pike that producers might want to keep their eyes and ears open for?
So yeah, obviously we need more research to find the fine tuning of how we can accurately use this Lipidol Protect technology in dairy producers. So we continue to do our research in partnership with the universities in the United States. So that's our next step, to keep pushing the research side and then having more publications with the Lipidol Protect so that we can bring into the nutritionists as well as dairy producers to fine tune how we can exactly use this technology into your farm.
Okay, perfect. And as we're kind of getting down there, not quite the last question yet, but from Chancel and Brad, what have I missed on asking questions on that you guys are just itching to talk about in this product? Is there anything that your guys really want to make sure that producers are aware of, or maybe that, is just a really cool feature that we just didn't discuss yet?
Well, I'll tell you, back to me getting involved with the company and the technology, I got really excited about the parent company, Easy Bio, Pathway Intermediates. This is a company that is dedicated to science and research. As I looked at this product and its use in the monogastric world, they have 19 publications globally in different research projects in universities on this technology. So they're not afraid to stand up, put it to test in the research environment in the universities under peer review. And so that to me was exciting. I continue to see that commitment as we move forward. And Chancel's exactly right. We have a lot to learn, how to fine tune and use this tool with ruminants. We are doing some work in beef with it as well. And we did a study at Illinois on beef cattle, and we're seeing a lot of promise there. So when you look at the technology and you say, okay, here's a product that's working in swine, it's working in poultry, it's actually working in aquaculture. We're feeding this to shrimp, we're feeding it on trout farms. You say, well, gosh, is it applicable on the ruminant side? And of course, yes, once we did that bypass, that carbohydrate protection, we're basically using the same mode of action in the small intestine of the ruminant to affect the same sort of changes that we're seeing in these other species as well. So I think that really makes it exciting technology, that it is working across so many different species. And now we're seeing really nice results in dairy cattle as well.
Exciting things all around. Chancel, do you have anything that you wanted to chime in on before I ask my last question of the day?
Well, so I want to also going back to that name here, that the first rumen bypass absorption accelerator. So the Pathway Intermediate was the first company who introduced this LPL technology into the animal feed industry as an absorption accelerator. And also, up to date, to my knowledge, Lipidol Protect is the only product in the market which has a carbohydrate, the rumen bypass isophospholipid technology. So we are the professional here, and then we've done the research in the monogastric area. So this Lipidol Protect is the unique technology in the currently at this moment, the first lumen bypass isophospholipid product in the market.
Well, that's exciting. And we always love having those who have the experience and the companies behind it that have the research there as well to really support that experience. But as we begin to wrap up here this afternoon, gentlemen, we've had a really good discussion about the product, what it can look like on farm, some of the benefits that people can really think about, and if it fits their production. But to end things off today, if you could, talk to producers and have one or two things that you really want them to be thinking about or actively doing after today's conversation, what would that be?
I just say have your nutritionist reach out to the company and set up one of these, 45-minute Zoom calls and let Dr. Park and myself take you and your nutritional team through the product and get you educated on it so you understand this new technology and how it might fit on farm. I think that's really the takeaway here is to get engaged, learn more about it. Let us take you through the science and the research, et cetera, and get you educated. And then again, allow you and your nutritionist to make a decision as to whether it's a good fit to try out on your farm. Like many companies, this is new technology. So we do have some incentive situations where we'll help get it on farm and give you a chance to look at it at sort of an introductory rate. So we'll work with you on those sorts of things. But really, it's just mainly get educated and understand the technology.
Thank you for that, Brad. Anything that you would like to add, Chancellor?
So yeah, as Brad mentioned, we have 19 publications of today. So yeah, I will be more than happy to share those publications if you have more curious about the technology. So especially from a nutritionist standpoint, sometimes they want to see the publication before they want to really listen about this commercial talking. So I will be more than happy to share those publications. So although it is on the monogastric side heavily, but we have one publication that Brad mentioned that conducted in the Ohio State University. So yeah, I think that can be also the first step to open the mind and then thinking about this new technology.
Well, Chancellor, Brad, thank you so much for your time here this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to have our Nexus presenters be able to join us here on the Dairy Signal and provide a little bit more of a conversational aspect to it, to a really great product that was, got to the Nexus stage because dairy producers thought it had innovation and merit behind it. So thank you so much for your time here this afternoon. It's much appreciated to have you on.
Well,
great to be with you, Amber. Thank you very much.
And I have to say thank you to those who listened, asked their questions, or maybe are joining us after the fact and listening while they're in the field or in the barn. But I appreciate you guys just as much for joining us here. But for now, I have to say have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll see you here tomorrow on the Dairy Signal. Bye now.